So it is with great pleasure that I introduce to my constituents my guide, my teacher, and my friend, Senator Robert C. Byrd.
In May of 2001, Senator Byrd received what he considers his greatest honor when Governor Bob Wise in both houses of the West Virginia legislature named him West Virginian of the 20th century.
So I called old Clyde Goodwin after the war when I got back to Crab Orchard, and I said, Clyde, I think I'll get into politics. What's your recommendation? He said, well, run for the House of Delegates. I said, don't run for a county office. Don't run for sheriff or county court or anything. Run for the House of Delegates. You're a poor boy. You've got no money and nobody to lift you up. You have to start at the bottom. So I filed for the House of Delegates, $10. Now, in 1950, I decided to run for the state Senate, West Virginia Senate. I'd been in the House of Delegates 2 terms.
And you moved right on up through the legislature there, and you got your break into Congress. It looked like a pretty steady progression every step of the way. Apparently, you haven't lost an election.
No, I've never lost an election. In 30 years, I have held more legislative elective offices than any person in the history of the state of West Virginia. I hold all voting records in West Virginia. I have the highest popular vote ever given to anyone there, a West Virginia candidate. I'm the only West Virginian who's ever gotten over 500,000 votes.
Is that so? Was this last election, I guess?
I've gotten it twice. I got in the last election in my race with George Wallace in the presidential primary down there, and then I also got over 500,000 votes back in 1964 when I ran. I also have the highest vote percentage-wise. In the primary 6 years ago, I got 89% of the vote, 88.88% of the vote, 88.88. And in my race with George Wallace in this last primary, I got 89.01. So I improved my percentage points by 13/100%. This administration has not finished the first war against terrorism, and yet it is eager to embark on another conflict with perils much greater than those in Afghanistan. Is our attention span that short? One can understand the anger and the shock of any president after the savage attacks of September 11. One can appreciate the frustration of having only a shadow to chase and an amorphous, fleeting enemy on which it is nearly impossible to exact retribution. But to turn one's frustration and anger into the kind of extremely destabilizing and dangerous foreign policy debacle that the world is currently witnessing is inexcusable from any administration charged with the awesome power and responsibility of guiding the destiny of the greatest superpower on the planet. The rafters should ring. The press galleries should be filled. Senators should be at their seats, listening to questions being asked about this war. Yet this chamber is hauntingly silent, on what is possibly the eve of horrific infliction of death and destruction on the population of the nation of Iraq.
Old Linkage, if you don't care, leave my liquor jug sitting right here. If it ain't here when I get back, I'll race in.
I'm glad that I was born a poor boy, came up the hard way, and I have a I wouldn't want it any other way. I tell you, I don't have very much patience with these people who don't want to start at the bottom. They want to start at the top. They're not willing to work and sweat. They think that the society owes them a living, and don't have too many people who want to start at the bottom anymore. But I'm very fortunate to live in a country like this. I've traveled in many countries, and I've had an opportunity to see how other people live. And the best place in the world is right here. I was taught the basic fundamentals by poor parents. My foster father was one of the greatest men I ever knew. I never heard him use God's name in vain. All the years I lived with him. He worked hard. He was honest. He didn't owe anybody a penny when he died. Just an old hard-working coal miner. Humble. Believed in God. Read his Bible. I still have it. My foster mother was the hardest working person I ever saw in my lifetime. She was a hard worker. Had a hard time all her life. But she taught me when I just can barely remember that there was a God, and she was a very religious woman. I don't remember her ever having given me a kiss. She wasn't emotional or outgoing or anything like that. She was tough, and but she was religious. I used to pray when I was a little boy. I'd pray that my foster parents would live till I became a grown man. I loved my foster parents. One of my ambitions in those years when I was a teenager was to be the national champion fiddler.
If the ocean was whiskey and I was a duck, I'd dive to the bottom, I'd never come up. Rye whiskey, rye whiskey, rye whiskey, I cry. If I don't get rye whiskey, I surely will die.
Anytime a colleague asks me to come out to a senator and speak for him, he always asks me to bring that instrument. And the people in New York and California and Alaska and Colorado and Nevada and New Mexico pat their feet when I play that violin, just like the people of West Virginia do. They like that down-to-earth, good, wholesome music.
Gonna sit down by my Jesus when I lay my burdens down. Gonna sit down by my Jesus when I lay my burdens down. I'm gonna tell my Jesus howdy when I lay my burdens down. I'm gonna tell my Jesus howdy when I lay my burdens down. Will the circle